old adage goes, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. In professional wrestling, preparation is key. As we all know, professional wrestling isn't fake, it's predetermined. Agents, producers, and the wrestlers themselves come together and lay out the match before showtime. When all goes to plan, the two wrestlers lock up, battle in and out of the ring, and Charlotte Flair wins. But what happens when things don't go to plan? When a certain incident arises which causes the match to veer off course? Well, that's when the predetermined becomes the undetermined, and wrestlers have to create a plan in the moment. A ring general can sometimes take control of a situation and ensure a match reaches a normal conclusion without the viewing audiences noticing anything is amiss. But sometimes, havoc reigns supreme. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 wrestling matches which were changed on the fly. Join us! Number 10, Chris Jericho vs. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Following Ricky the Dragon Steamboat's age-defying performance at WrestleMania 25, the WWE realized that the veteran from Hawaii had one more run in him. Steamboat showed agility and ability way beyond what was expected of him at the silver anniversary of WrestleMania, and was promptly booked on a house show loop against his WrestleMania opponent Chris Jericho. They wrestled in Tokyo, Honolulu, Greenville, South Carolina. It was in South Carolina, a hotbed for the NWA, where plans were changed. Through the previous run of shows, Jericho had beaten Steamboat clean in the middle of the ring with the Codebreaker. However, on this night, Jericho thought better. As they were wrestling in front of this partisan crowd, Jericho thought it was time to pay back Steamboat for the inspiration he'd given a young boy from Winnipeg, you idiot, years ago. Following the usual finishing sequence, Jericho implored Steamboat to kick out, and when he did, at the very last moment, the South Carolina crowd went wild. In his third autobiography, The Best in the World, at what I have no idea, Jericho stated, "The crowd was exactly where I wanted them, and I didn't have much time to waste. So I grabbed Steamboat by the hair and said under my breath, 'WrestleMania 3 finish.'" At that moment, Jericho scooped Steamboat up for a slam, and just like he'd done 22 years earlier, Steamboat slipped down and rolled his opponent up tightly for the 1, 2, 3. Number 9, DX vs. Rated RKO. In the summer of 2006, DX returned, but this was a new DX. There was no X-Pac, Road Dogg, Billy Gunn, or China. Toilet humor had replaced strip poker, and the tandem of Shawn Michaels and Triple H battled the forces of evil in the form of the Spirit Squad, Jonathan Coachman, and the McMahons. Many things were missing about the new DX, but one thing that was evidently absent was a worthy opponent. In 2006, there was no Hart Foundation, no Nation of Domination, and certainly no Stone Cold Steve Austin for them to be matched evenly with. This changed, however, when in October 2006, the Rated R superstar Edge and the Viper Randy Orton aligned together to form a tag team capable of challenging the almighty D-Generation X. The teams battled through the winter of 2006, and the rivalry was reaching a crescendo at New Year's Revolution in January 2007, where Rated RKO would defend their World Tag Team titles against DX. The original plan was for Rated RKO to sneak a win over DX, which would lead to a bigger match the following month. However, as Triple H delivered a spinebuster to Randy Orton, the game's quad tore away and left him in a hobbling heap. The referee threw up the X, not because he was revealed as a surprise third member of DX, but to relay the information of the injury to the back. Messages were thrown back and forth between the talent in the ring and the producers backstage before Shawn Michaels made an audible call for a schmoz finish. He dropped the referee with a right hand and then laid out Rated RKO with 2 chair shots. Orton and Edge both found themselves covered in blood as the pair of degenerates pounded them over and over again with the chairs. The match finally came to an end with a no contest decision after HBK put Orton through the announce table with an elbow drop from the top rope. As far as improvisation goes, this one turned out pretty well thanks to the years of experience of the 4 men in the ring. Number 8, the Royal Rumble match 1996. In many people's estimation, 1996 was a poor year for the WWE. The NWO emerged in WCW to take over the wrestling world, ECW was pushing the envelope and innovating in a way no American company had done before, while the WWE presented Fake Diesel and Fake Razor Ramon as their newest superstars. But no matter how good or bad a year in professional wrestling is, a standout event is always the Royal Rumble. I bloody love it. 30 men compete for a chance to headline WrestleMania. 30 men in a ring. What could go wrong? It turns out, quite a lot. Triple H played the Iron Man that year, lasting a respectable 48 minutes, yet he eliminated nobody. Not one single competitor. Shawn Michaels was the most obvious winner of all time, and a man by the name of the Ringmaster was due a big push. But instead of a big push, Steve Austin got, well, he got a big push. Austin entered at number 24 under his ringmaster gimmick and was due to last until the famed Final Four before being eliminated by the eventual winner, Michaels. However, during the course of the match, Austin found himself near the ropes, at which point Fatu ran at Austin and pushed him over the top rope with an almighty clothesline from Samoa, with both of Austin's feet touching the floor. The ringmaster was clearly legitimately frustrated with the botched elimination, and Shawn Michaels then had to rework a whole new finish to the match as Karma took Austin's place in the Final Four. Michaels bounced around and skinned the cat as Karma clubbed him with forearms. Diesel deposited Karma over the top before turning around and being super kicked to the floor by the last man standing, Shawn Michaels. Once again, the expertise of Shawn Michaels helped save the match, and thankfully no one had to hear from or see that spot-ruining Steve Austin ever again. Number 7, Andre the Giant versus Akira Maeda. In the summer of 1986, Andre the Giant made one of his many trips to Japan. Andre was very popular with the Japanese audience and had developed a good working relationship with Antonio Inoki and New Japan. It made sense for the Giant Man from France to frequent Japan to earn a few substantial paydays, while also building anticipation for his return to US soil. However, what didn't make sense was his match in 1986 with Akira Maeda. History is muddled on this one, as varying accounts have been made about the reason behind the debacle of a match which occurred that night in Japan. But one thing which cannot be disputed is the fact that it was a disaster. Some have reported that Akira had a falling out with Inoki, and in order to teach the younger man a lesson, Inoki ordered Andre to shoot on Akira during the match. Another widely held belief is that Andre arrived intoxicated, and Maeda took this as a slight, which led to the quasi-shoot wrestling match. In either event, the match started out in the same manner it continued, with each competitor circling the other in slow lumbering movements. Eventually, Akira began to pepper Andre with stiff leg kicks, which the Giant no-sold and even laughed off at one point. The pair of them would tumble to the mat and each took turns grabbing holds while the other no-sold or wormed out with a kick for good measure. The Japanese crowd just sat quietly and watched the two men continue to circle each other, landing occasional blows which would be ignored by the recipients. Finally, following almost half an hour of this charade, Andre fell to the floor and demanded Maeda pin him. Maeda refused, and this drew Inoki to emerge from the back and ad-lib a finish. A number of other wrestlers entered the ring, and before long they began to hammer each other with fists as Andre continued to lie flat on his back and Maeda brooded in the corner. Simply put, this was a giant disaster. Get it? Number 6, Chris Jericho versus Neville. In March 2016, Chris Jericho had ended his short-lived tag team with AJ Styles with a heel turn everyone saw coming. Sadly, another heel was soon to turn, which none of us expected. On an episode of Raw, Y2J was due to face Neville. Before he was Pac again, and after he was Adrian, Geordie Nev was somewhat floundering in WWE's lower mid-card. This match with former world champion Jericho was a great opportunity to display his immeasurable talent to the world. The two engaged in a standard opening to a Raw match, but after only 2 minutes of the contest, Neville leapt onto Jericho's shoulders for a Frankensteiner and told Jericho to go for the finish. The finish of the match would see Neville attempt this move and Jericho to use his veteran instinct to counter into a Walls of Jericho for the victory. However, Jericho was confused about the sudden rush to the finish and instead of reversing the maneuver, took it to completion. It was at this point that Neville let the Canadian know he'd broken his ankle. Thinking quickly, Jericho rolled Neville up tightly with a schoolboy. Referee Charles Robinson clearly didn't get the message though, as he counted only to 2. At this point, Jericho, incensed, jumped to his feet and shoved the official in the chest, shouting loudly for all to hear, "He's hurt!" At this point, Robinson, along with the entire front row and just about everybody watching at home, understood. The referee quickly called for a DQ, and he and Jericho continued to shout at one another, whilst poor Neville rolled around on the mat in agony. Number 5, Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle. Ouch, ouch, ouch. How Brock Lesnar was still able to walk after this, I will never know. It was 2003 and that year's WrestleMania was set to be up there as one of the best Manias ever. HBK versus Y2J, McMahon versus Hogan, Rock versus Austin 3, Triple H versus Booker T, yeah. Anyway, in the main event, Brock Lesnar was due to square off with Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship. This was due to be Brock's crowning moment when he would be presented to the Seattle crowd, not as the next big thing, but simply the big thing. The preparation for the main event could have been better as Angle came into the event with a suspected broken neck. To make matters worse, Angle wasn't competing against a veteran who could work around the injury like The Undertaker or Eddie Guerrero, but the Beast incarnate, who was just 1 year into his WWE career. Surprisingly though, 95% of the match went to plan. The two amateur wrestling stars put on a professional show for all to see. Then it happened. Brock hauled all 300 pounds of muscle up to the top rope, he wobbled, then with an agility a man his size should not possess, Lesnar jumped high and flipped upside down into a shooting star press. Maybe Angle was too far away, maybe the ropes were slippery, or maybe Lesnar was too tired to complete the move, but whatever caused it, the next big thing came short of the target and landed head and neck first into the canvas. Lesnar tried in vain to grab Angle, but the impact of the crash caused him to roll away. This was supposed to be the big finish, the big WrestleMania moment. But in the moments following, Lesnar lay unmoving in the middle of the ring, and Angle looked around to try and understand what exactly had happened. At this point, Angle improvised at a speed beyond his own experience. He'd only been a professional wrestler for 4 years at this point, and covered Lesnar. He screamed at the younger man to kick out, and somehow Brock had the sense to raise his shoulder at 2. Angle then called the finish on the spot and told Lesnar to hit an F5 and cover him for the win and the title. Number 4, Steve Regal versus Goldberg. This match is the tale of two sides. Regal himself has consistently denied any wrongdoing on his part and has explained he was only following orders. However, it does seem odd that WCW's orders would be for the man from Blackpool to out-wrestle and beat up their hottest up-and-coming star on national TV, but that is what happened. In February 1998, Regal and Goldberg squared off on Nitro. Up until this point, Goldberg had squashed every opponent put in front of him in about 30 seconds. But on this night, Regal would not be beaten so simply. Regal used every trick in the book to evade Goldberg's destructive offense while landing a lot of his own. Through the match, Regal hit Goldberg with numerous stiff uppercuts, solid kicks, and at one point a chop block to the front of Goldberg's knee, which looked like it could have legitimately injured the former football player. Eventually, Regal succumbed to a spear and a jackhammer to be pinned clean in the middle of the ring. But that is not the full story. Something clearly went wrong with this match. Was it just that Goldberg was inexperienced and couldn't keep up with Regal's work, or was the Englishman changing plans on the spot? Goldberg himself said in his autobiography, "The office didn't tell him to go out and take advantage of me. He tried to kick my face in a couple of times, and I was just giving him my face." Perhaps this is just another wrestling mystery, but it sure is interesting. Number 3, the Royal Rumble match 2005. Angry Vince. Angry, sweaty, sweary Vince. It was January 2005, and the WWE were ready to crown 2 new stars at their annual Royal Rumble event. From SmackDown, there was John Cena, and from Raw, Batista. Both were on the rise and gathering crowd support. Both were seen as the future of their respective brands, and both were due the spotlight to be shone on them at the Royal Rumble. After 28 other men had been eliminated, Cena and Batista were the final 2 men left in the Rumble match. Following a brief exchange between the pair, the Animals scooped up the Doctor of Thugonomics for a Batista bomb. But instead of slamming Cena into the mat or to the outside, Batista lost balance and both men flipped over the top rope. Even on the video replay, it wasn't clear whose feet hit the ground first. It's actually quite outstanding that this moment wasn't planned, as it really was brilliant. What's even more impressive than the unplanned double elimination is the reaction of the referees. Instead of scratching their heads and wondering what to do, Charles Robinson, the Raw referee raised the hand of Batista and the SmackDown official claimed Cena was the winner. Big Dave and Bigger Match John played their parts too, as they both claimed victory. A standoff ensued as both parties had a rightful claim to the win. Who could help restore justice and keep the peace? Enter Vince McMahon, the angriest, sweatiest, sweariest Vince McMahon of all time. He stormed down the aisle, screaming every step of the way. He then dived, red face first, under the bottom rope and promptly ripped both quadricep muscles clean off the bone. Whilst McMahon sat on the mat, Batista and Cena improvised a spot by each taking it in turns to throw the other over the top rope. Finally, Vince ordered the match to restart. Well, the final 2 to restart, not all 30 men. And following a brief back and forth, Batista dumped Cena over the top rope, claiming the win and a WrestleMania main event. Well deserved. Number 2, the Acolytes versus Public Enemy. Public Enemy were one of the premier teams in ECW, and they hoped to follow other ECW stars who'd made a big splash in the WWE, such as Mick Foley, Steve Austin, and Scott Hall. Yes, Scott Hall was there. Unfortunately for them, however, they ran afoul of Ron Simmons and one John Layfield. As the story goes, Public Enemy were due to compete against the team who were then known as the Acolytes on Sunday Night Heat. The finish of the match was to see two members of the Ministry slam Rocco and Johnny through a table positioned at ringside. Apparently, just as the match was due to begin, the Public Enemy let Simmons and Layfield know that they had decided they were no longer going to do the table spot. This angered Simmons to the point that he simply stated, if they don't want to be brought to the table, we'll bring the table to them. And so, they did. In fact, the Acolytes brought a lot more than the table to them. From the sound of the bell, they rained down stiff punches and kicks on the former Extreme wrestlers. Bradshaw bent a steel chair in half whilst administering his own form of Texas Justice, and Farouk delivered one of the scariest looking dominators of all time. Eventually, Johnny Grunge was kicked, yes, kicked, through the table. Even after the table was broken in half, the Acolytes continued to punish Public Enemy. Finally, mercifully, it came to an end after referee Jimmy Corderas threw out the finish. This was essentially the end of Public Enemy's WWE tenure, but at least Farouk and Bradshaw were suitably admonished so they would never shoot on another wrestler in the ring again. Number 1, Jeff Hardy vs. Sting. In many ways, Jeff Hardy vs. Sting is a bit of a dream match. Just the visual image of the two face-painted heroes standing toe-to-toe is enough for most wrestling fans to get a ripple of goosebumps. Sadly, this dream match became a nightmare in every possible way. Jeff Hardy was not in a good place at this time. He was in TNA. But beyond that, Hardy was also battling his own personal demons and arrived at the arena in a state which should have meant the match he was due to compete in was instantly cancelled. Somehow though, the producers that night decided to let Hardy go to the ring. Even at this point, there seemed to be no plan in place as to how they were going to get out of this situation. Following the ring introductions, Eric Bischoff made his way to the ring, telling the audience there was a slight change of plans. He then began to try and kill some time and talk nonsensically about the network and leveling the playing field by changing the match stipulation to no DQ. Whilst Bischoff addressed the audience, he held the mic at his side between sentences and spoke in rapid fire to Hardy and then to Sting. Once the match began, Hardy spent a full minute walking around the ring pretending to throw his shirt to the audience. Eventually, the pair locked up and Sting dragged Hardy into position to hit a Scorpion Death Drop. He then hooked Hardy's legs, who was clearly trying to kick out, and pinned him for real. Hardy protested in the ring as Sting made his way up the ramp. The crowd voiced their displeasure, and Sting said on camera he agreed with their chants of BS.
Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. You can follow us on Twitter at Cultaholic. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.